I'm joined now by Sir Roger Gale, who has been a Conservative MP for more than 40 years. And he's now part of a small group of fellow Conservative MPs who are now speaking out against the genocide in Gaza and speaking out against the UK's complicity in it. Thanks for joining us, Roger. I wanted to start by asking, as someone who has been in Parliament for so long, almost longer than anyone else, what, in your view, could be done or should be done by the UK government to help people in Gaza right now?
I think the absolute priority, and I've said this very publicly, has to be humanitarian aid. I've traveled around the world, I've seen death and starvation in all sorts of places. I have never seen food and water weaponized in the way that the Israelis are using it as a weapon in Gaza. People are starving, people are dying of thirst, people are ill and have no medicines. So for me now, the important thing, the absolute priority, is to get food and water and medicine in to reach the people that need it immediately, not tomorrow or the day after, but now. And I've said twice now, last week and again yesterday in the House of Commons, that I believe that we are failing in a clear duty to show a lead. There are routes in directly into Gaza. There was a route opened up between Larnaca in Cyprus into a pontoon bridge in Gaza. Distance is very infinitely smaller than most people realize. We're talking about less than 100 miles between the island of Cyprus and the mainland. So it's doable, but somebody has to show a lead.
We saw the attempt by Greta Thunberg and other activists to do kind of basically what you were saying of taking aid through, across the sea and into Gaza that way, and they were blocked by the Israeli military. I mean, presumably it would be different if it was the British armed forces doing it rather than a small group of activists.
Miss Thunberg is very good at focusing attention on things in fairly dramatic ways. But brutally, that was a stunt. The amount of aid that was being carried on that yacht, which is what it was minimal. I mean, it wouldn't have fed one family for a week, probably. So the idea that that would have made any difference other than symbolically is a nonsense. What is needed is vast quantities of aid now. And that can be done. Now, you say, should we use British troops? I would argue that the British ought to be raising this at Security Council with the UN with a view to using UN troops, blue berets. Whether they would need to be armed or not is a moot point. Because it's not only, of course, landing the food, as opposed to taking it across a land border. It's then, as we've seen, the distribution. And the distribution points, because you're dealing with desperate people, are flashpoints. And it's a potentially very explosive, dangerous situation. So not just the delivery, but the distribution has to be managed properly. That, it seems to me, is a matter for troops. And I believe personally that those troops ought to be the blue berets of the United Nations.
I suppose the point I was getting at is that clearly Israel does not want aid to be delivered in that way. And so where does that leave the UK government, even if the will was there to do that,
What
which it doesn't seem to be. But
what Israel wants is, to me, at the moment, absolutely immaterial. I couldn't care less what Israel wants on this front. They want the return of the hostages. That I understand. Of course they do. And I want that too. They want condemnation of the 7th of October. And that's a given. We all believe that. But we have to, again, I have to say, we need to focus on what is needed immediately. And that is to stop more people dying of starvation and thirst and illness. And the way to do that is to get supplies in bulk into Gaza and to see it properly distributed. Now, nobody else is taking a lead. People are talking. We've got a meeting next week, I think, with the French and the Canadians or somebody else. And and it's all talk. I mean, Lord Faulkner came to Lord Faulkner, I beg your pardon, um,
Hamish Faulkner.
Hamish Faulkner, who's now a Foreign Office Minister, of course, came to the Commons last week and said, "We are taking steps, we are doing things, we are going to have conversations about things." And then he made a bizarre, late in the evening statement this week when we thought it was going to be an announcement. Quite clearly, I mean, there's a reason for making the statement, isn't there? He's going to say he's going to unilaterally recognize the state of Palestine, which would have been a significant gesture. What did he actually do? He said we're sanctioning two people. Like this is going to spread alarm and despondency amongst the administration of Israel. A certain amount of synthetic outrage. But in reality, does that sanction put bread and water into the mouths of starving people? No, not one iota. So that statement for me was absolutely pointless. And I'm afraid I sat there in the comments saying, is that it?
You mentioned Palestinian statehood there, and you actually tried to deliver a letter to Downing Street, didn't you, about that subject? What happened with that?
Well, Sir Edward Lee, who is the father of the House, he's the longest serving member. I'm third longest serving member, but I'm the oldest. He's the father of the House, and Kit Malthouse, who's a Privy Councillor, and others. And there were others who weren't able to come, but also signed the letter. Went to Downing Street, and all we asked to do was to deliver a letter to the Prime Minister saying, "Please, will you recognise the state of Palestine unilaterally?" And to our total astonishment, it's almost unheard of for members of Parliament to be denied access. And we weren't asking for a meeting with the Prime Minister. All we wanted to do was hand in a letter to Number 10. And that's done every day of the week for all sorts of purposes. And we were refused entry, which was, and we had to put the thing in the internal post where it'll probably sit for days.
I said at the beginning, you're part of this quite small group of Conservative MPs speaking out. Why do you think that so few MPs are actually prepared to speak out about Gaza? Is there a lot of pressure on them? What is it that is stopping MPs from saying, what you've been saying, calling it a genocide?
MPs speak out on all sorts of things. And don't assume the fact that there were four of us on the doorsteps of Downing Street means there are only four of us. There's a significant group. Former Attorney General, for one. I mean, there's a significant number of people who feel the way that we feel. And we all speak out on all sorts of different things.
I think from an outsider's perspective, it feels like, this has been going on for nearly 20 months now, about 20 months. It feels like there are not that many politicians who are really speaking out about this. Do you feel that there is any kind of pressure on MPs to kind of toe the party line?
Well, certainly none on me.
Okay.
My whip knows very well what I do, and I courteously discuss my intentions with her. She has not at any time said to me, "Roger, it'd be really helpful if you shut up," if that's what you mean. Now, you raise an interesting point, really. You talked about 20 months. At some point, a line was crossed between self-defense and aggression, and then, I would argue, into genocide. That line there's no clear sort of, this is the date upon which this happened that you can say. It was a sort of sliding scale. And that's why I think it's taken some time for some of us to move from a position of broad support for the cause of the Israeli people, if not the government, to a position of real concern about international crimes, genocide, improper activity, and for me, the weaponization of food and water and medicines.
See, this is the bit I don't quite understand, because obviously I think a lot of people will be very happy that you are speaking out, but it's been, as I say, 20 months since October the 7th, and pretty much from the get-go, the actions of the Israeli government have been horrific. Right from the get-go, they cut off electricity and water. Right from the get-go, they senior government ministers and military officials were coming out with horrific genocidal statements that are now actually, being cited in the International Criminal Court case against them. And the question is for people in Parliament is what's taken so long?
Most people, and to some extent you, I'm afraid, are taking, at the very least, an oversimplistic view of a very complex situation. The aggression by Hamas, which is for the moment the quote lawful government of Gaza, although Hamas is a terrorist organization, those activities have been going on for not months but years in one form or another. The 7th of October was the trigger point for a significant reaction by the Israelis. It's very easy to say, yes, of course there was rhetoric. And at some point, yes, that rhetoric turned into what is now action and war crime.
It turned into genocidal rhetoric right from the start.
Well, no,
and
I'm sorry, Martin, there's a difference between rhetoric and action.
Rhetoric can be a crime.
There are politicians in this country that say things that, frankly, I find abhorrent. But they're saying them. They're not doing them. And if you believe in free speech, then up to a point you have to accept that people will say things that you don't like.
So statements of genocidal intent are okay.
Well, you could argue, couldn't you, that I suppose the 7th of October attack was, in a sense, an act of the beginnings of potential genocide. And Hamas has said right from the very beginning they want to wipe the state of Israel off the face of the earth.
So, I don't think anyone is disagreeing that what Hamas did on October the 7th is
you're disagreeing, because what you're trying to do is make a case on one side without making a case on both sides. And I'm prepared to see both sides of this. In fact, I'm not only prepared, I have to.
Okay. Let's just finish up by talking about what's next in all this, because it does seem that there are now more MPs speaking out about Gaza, as we said, but at the same time, we have America lobbying at the moment against recognition of Palestinian statehood. It seems that is going to perhaps reverse the intention of the UK and France to do so. Israel obviously is doing its own lobbying, and I wonder what power and influence ordinary MPs actually have in all this to change what's going on.
I think ordinary MPs have a duty to say what they believe to be right. And if nobody listens, then nobody listens. That shouldn't stop us saying what we believe to be right. I have been outspoken on a number of issues where initially I've been in the minority of one.
But do you think the government might actually change its view on this? Do you think they might do something that could sort of, actually change the situation in a meaningful way?
They could. They have the power to. Will they? Possibly not. There is a growing body of opinion on the government's backbenches that wants movement. But has Starmer got the political will and courage to do what I believe to be right? I don't think he has.
Okay, well, we will leave it there. Thank you very much, Roger. I really appreciate your time.
All right.